It's the story of Samuel and Isaiah, two enslaved young men on a plantation in Mississippi who fall in love. And how that love transforms, offends, revolutionizes the plantation on which they live and work. My name is Robert Jones Jr. I recently published my first novel, The Prophets. My book has been banned in Florida with the "Don't Say Gay" rule, and also in parts of Texas. So kids cannot read my book because it's about homosexuality. I was at first elated because it put me in the same category as Toni Morrison and James Baldwin. So I was like, wow, these people who have written something that was so revolutionary that the powers that be determined that it should not be read. But it is disgusting and a travesty that people like Baldwin and Morrison are banned in certain places. It's unthinkable. I realized that there might be a child in Texas or in Florida who might need to read this book to know that they are not alone, to know that there is nothing wrong with them, that they are a part of the human family who will now not have access to it. Then it made me incredibly sad and angry.
Martin Luther King returned to St. Augustine to lead what he called a massive assault against segregation. And he said, "I'm here to stay until the battle is won."
Our struggles against police brutality, our struggles against the racism in the criminal justice system in general.
Indians worship the sun here, a land bathed in warm sunshine and cool ocean breezes.
The first thing that I always ask everyone is if there is censorship in their country. So, is there censorship in America?
Yes, there is a tremendous amount of censorship, which I think is directly related to human rights that happens in the United States of America.
Florida is the blueprint in many ways for a wave of censorship and anti-democratic tendencies and policies. So first, you can't understand anything that's happening in the United States without understanding the full history of the United States. Everything in the States is impacted by genocide and slavery, and we continue to grapple with those in very real ways.
What do you want? I can breathe.
Now, the murder of George Floyd was the match on a fire that had been burning and burning and burning, and so many deaths of similar reason and ilk. What happened with George Floyd was like the straw on the camel's back. Our culture shifted, we felt it. We all of a sudden realized that, oh, we have a national responsibility of anti-racism. That triggered a massive response from mostly the right wing, extremist members of the right wing. And what you saw in response that started in Florida was a wave of legislation to start that process. And Florida, like I said, was the blueprint.
Ron DeSantis has waged war on schools, on curricula, on books, on LGBTQ. He's just waged a war on every cultural issue you can imagine. Never was the case before. Basically, he's passed laws which have empowered school districts to be able to pull books out of their libraries, and also to tell teachers that they cannot teach certain subjects.
So the process, the way it works is basically a parent will make a complaint. They have to fill out like a form explaining why they don't want that book in the library. The review process involves 2 parent representatives, 2 PTA representatives, I think 2 or 4 teachers, and the administrators of the school. They form like a committee to review the books and then say, keep it, restrict it, remove it. We've had a book on Roberto Clemente and Celia Cruz banned.
Catch-22.
The ABC of Black History.
The 1619 Project by Nicole Hannah-Jones, banned.
Draw Me a Star.
Most of Kurt Vonnegut's books.
Tango Makes Three.
Catcher in the Rye.
It's a book about 2, and it's an factual book. This actually happened. I think it was in the Central Park Zoo. It was 2 male penguins that they decided to basically hatch an egg together to form their own little family. And it's been banned because it speaks on 2 male penguins forming a family.
There are a large number of authors and classic books that have been banned in Florida and elsewhere. Toni Morrison's books have been banned en masse. The Bluest Eye, Beloved, books by Jodi Picoult. I've loved Jodi Picoult's books. 1984 is especially ironic. The Kite Runner, Slaughterhouse-5, the graphic novel, The Diary of Anne Frank, banned. Yeah.
Everyone knows my husband, Ron DeSantis, is endorsed by President Trump. Ron loves playing with the kids.
Build the wall. Make America great again.
I just thought you should know.
Ron DeSantis for governor.
He must know something, but don't say nothing. He just keeps rolling. He keeps on rolling along.
COVID and George Floyd are getting mixed up in the sort of cultural soup that's happening starting in the summer of 2020. And in 2021, you see the first introduction of censorial bills. So Florida passes HB 1 of that year. That's the anti-protest bill. That's directly at Black Lives Matter protesters. That's where it came from. We want to silence protesters and start criminalizing protest. And then we started seeing educational bills. In 2022, that starts getting very ramped up. In 2022, you see the passage of what is colloquially known as the Stop Woke Act and the Don't Say Gay bill. So COVID happens, Ron DeSantis says there's no way I'm shutting Florida down. Kids are going to school maskless, come on down.
Free, thank you. Thanks so much.
That was because there was a huge base support of a group of parental rights movement that had been growing with a lot of funding coming in. That parental rights movement that was anti-COVID restrictions is the exact same group banning books. Literally, they're the same.
My son's school required him to wear a mask, a face shield, and sit behind plexiglass. Thank you, Governor DeSantis, for keeping our schools safe and keeping our children safe as well.
Outstanding.
Thank you,
Great job.
These bills go after anyone who would support affirmative action, anyone who would admit that there is a thing as white privilege in our country, anyone that would say that, of course, there is a systemic racism structure in this country. And the other track is against our LGBTQ plus community. Okay, it's against sexual discussions of sexual orientation, sexual identity, gender identity.
We started Moms for Libros as kind of a tongue-in-cheek response to Moms for Liberty. They're basically an extremist group. They started during COVID. Their whole reason for forming was to fight masking and to fight mandatory vaccines. But they have evolved from that to getting very involved in education as far as, you know, looking to restrict books, looking to restrict the type of things that are being taught in schools. So basically what we try to do is educate people on what's going on. For example, right now there's a big issue with them wanting to introduce chaplains in schools. So we're speaking with a lot of the school board members to try and avoid that happening.
Apparently, book banning is not something new.
Never. No, it's not recent. But there's a major difference. The difference is back in those days, when Judy Blume was having her books banned, it wasn't the government doing it. See, that's the difference. When the government does it, then it's truly censorship from a legal perspective. So you now have laws that have been passed by the state legislature that were never there before. When Judy was being censored, there were groups and they were trying to pressure school systems not to carry certain books, or they were trying to pressure bookstores not to carry certain things. But there were never laws, specific laws. And when there were those laws, the Supreme Court quickly got rid of them. And that, I think, is the biggest thing, that politicians are using these bans as a way of developing a political perch. And that's what's different now.
A supposedly intelligent, well-educated young mother came up to me to tell me how much her 12-year-old son enjoyed Then Again, Maybe I Won't. And I was so pleased. And she said, but of course I cut out 2 pages. And I asked her why she did this, and she said because she didn't feel that he was ready to read about wet dreams at age 12.
I am a native Floridian. I've been in Miami my entire life. And I'm a mom of 2 kids that are 7 and 10. What they're banning is books that are in school. They're not banning books to purchase. And that's their whole argument, is that you can go to Amazon and purchase the book. But we're talking about kids who don't have access to a vehicle on their own. They might not have access to, the public library. And they're taking books out of their school library where they can access it a lot easier and saying it's not banned. I would argue that it is, because now you're taking away their accessibility.
Florida for years was probably one of the more progressive states in the South. But because of gerrymandering and all of those different things, we have a preponderance of, I don't even call it conservative, but we have a preponderance of anti-democratic folks who are now in the state legislature and the state senate. And this also led to the election of Ron DeSantis, because he was trying to play on people's fears as it related to books, as it related to their kids. And so the combination of the two, having a state legislature that's primarily anti-democratic, and with DeSantis proposing these outlandish laws, that's where we are now.
These universal bans are inherently unfair, because it means that you are dictating for me what's right for my child, and I get to say, what is right for my child. That has nothing to do with you. And if you don't want your child to read my book, I completely understand. If you think that sex is something that you want to have a personal conversation with your child with, and you don't want them to read it in a book, that's reasonable. But you don't have the right to tell every other parent what their child should and should not be reading.
It seems like there's been a big push in education to make everything a lot more conservative, to keep information away from kids that is beneficial to them, that it'll help them make informed decisions as they grow. And it's information that I remember receiving as a child. It was wild growing up in the 80s. I don't recall there being any kind of censorship. I grew up during a time where AIDS was a big deal. I saw the fall of the Berlin Wall. I saw the fall of the Soviet Union, things like that. I saw a lot. And there was always very truth-based, factual education. We even got very comprehensive sex ed in schools, whereas now they haven't even talked to my son about sex education, and he's going into 6th grade.
As a student in the public school system here, I could read anything I wanted. There was never an issue. And if you look at what I read then, all of those books are probably not allowed to be taught today. And I turned out okay.
I started reading at a very young age. My father collected comic books, and he gave me my first comic book, which was Wonder Woman. It's because of that I wanted to start writing, because I wanted to write myself into these adventures. I didn't really know that Black people wrote books, because when I was going to school, we didn't read anything by Black authors. It was only white authors that we read. So I wasn't as engaged with reading until much later, when I discovered at the age of 16, Terry McMillan, who wrote a book called Mama. And then I thought to myself, oh my God, there are books like this that speak to my experience, that see me as a person, that looks at my experiences and say, these are worthy of literary analysis. And so from the age of 16, I became a very avid reader.
A lot of writers have made a lot of their money by making appearances at schools and libraries. That's how they, that's how they survive, is that they make an appearance at a library and they get paid something to be there, or at a school. What's happening now, a lot of these people, if they get if they're banned, libraries are stopping inviting them, and so are schools. And I hear from a lot of, other than the most famous writers, I'm hearing from a majority of writers having a really tough time. And it's chilling what they write. In other words, they're beginning to censor what they're doing, which is a horrible thing to think about.
We have to understand the connection and the reliance that these authors have on the entire spectrum of how we provide resources to our children, right? So having your book in libraries is a key part to your own survival. It's a key part to you having your work out there. It doesn't make you it doesn't benefit you financially or any other ways to be targeted. And so we don't see these rise in book sales and this, we see a drop in book sales. We see people fleeing from stories and authors like this so they won't be targeted. And we see it across the board with publishers, school boards, all these things, that folks that don't want to be part of censorship but are becoming part of the mechanism that is being created.
The literacy rates in the United States have dropped tremendously. Children cannot read, or they cannot read works of a certain length. A lot of this has to do with social media and how it is attacking their attention spans, but it also has to do with how the country no longer values the literary arts. I have received emails from people on the continent of Africa, in countries where my book would not be welcome, who have sort of passed my book along on this like kind of underground library where they pass from country to country to these queer communities in places like Zimbabwe and Ghana and Nigeria. And I've received emails where they say, thank you so much for writing this story. Those sorts of things are beyond prizes and reviews and all of these other things. These are the things that are most meaningful for me.
My fear is more along the lines of representation. If a child doesn't see themselves represented in books, you know, what does that do to their confidence, their mental health? I remember, for example, back in the 90s when I was in school, there was a lot of homophobia going on, and it was detrimental to a lot of my friends who were either gay or lesbian. They had a lot of mental health issues. And I feel like what's going on right now towards, you know, with that narrative, with removing those kinds of books where they might be able to see themselves represented, is going to affect them mentally. I had an uncle who was gay. He came out to my very conservative Cuban family. There was a lot of things that were said to him that shouldn't have been said. My grandfather and him never had a very great relationship because of it. And then my grandfather died in 2005, and there was a lot of unresolved issues. My uncle committed suicide in 2006 because of those unresolved issues. So it hits home to me.